How's it going, everyone? Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting and Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining me today for our exclusive in-depth breakdown of each signing in the Crimson Tide's 2026 recruiting class during the early signing period. When it comes to Touchdown Alabama, we break down Alabama football as well as breaking down Alabama football recruiting updates. So be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Subscribe to the notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. When you take a look at the Crimson Tide's 2026 class, this class is loaded from top to bottom. Talent on offense, talent on defense. A lot of guys who are going to come in, most likely making an immediate impact in Tuscaloosa. Some hidden gems, some underrated guys like London Simmons was last year, guy who was a 3-star recruit coming out of Mississippi, has turned into a main contributor for the Crimson Tide on the defensive side of football this football season. You also had guys like Isaiah Brooks, who we penciled in as a potential day one impact type of guy. He has made that type of impact this season when it comes to the Crimson Tide 2025 football season. But when you take a look at this 2026 class, there's talent from a lot of different places. Like I said, we're going to break down each guy in this class in this video, starting with 2026 5-star linebacker Xavier Griffin from Gainesville, Georgia. Griffin is one of the most versatile linebackers when it comes to this 2026 recruiting class in the country, regardless of him being committed to Alabama. Whenever you just take a look at the multiple prospects across the country, Xavier Griffin is in that conversation when it comes to being the most versatile. This is a guy who can put his hand in the ground, rush from the edge, and play off the ball at inside linebacker. There has been a conversation for the Crimson Tide and their coaching staff, like, how can we use this guy? There's been a conversation about rushing him from the edge, having him play off the ball, having him play in space, because he has played that role at Gainesville High School during his high school career there. When you take a look at his recruitment, the Crimson Tide's outside linebacker coach, who mainly coaches the Wolf linebacker position, Christian Robinson, led the way for the Crimson Tide when it comes to them going after this talented edge rusher and linebacker. So there's conversations about him playing at that Wolf position, but also playing inside linebacker, because Zay Hall, Alabama's fellow linebacker signing on here today, he has confirmed to me that they have talked about playing him off the ball alongside Hall and Griffin, just playing together at the second level when it comes to the Crimson Tide's defense in general in the future. So this is a unique prospect at about 6'3", 6'4", lean type of guy. A lot of people like to compare him to Jahad Campbell. I always say Campbell was a little bit more filled out than Xavier Griffin was at this particular point in his career. I think one of the things really to monitor is how much will Xavier Griffin grow in terms of his frame when he first gets to Tuscaloosa, and I think that would have an impact on how early he can play. But he is in that conversation for guys who I'm going to talk about in this video who could possibly make an early impact in Tuscaloosa. I saw this guy in action when Gainesville High School took on Moody a couple of years ago when he was a junior. Saw him play 7-on-7 when he played inside linebacker. It looked right at home. Really long frame, a guy who can turn speed into power plays in space really well. Great tackler, wiry type of guy. So this is a great get for the Crimson Tide in this 2026 class. A 5-star who is set to change things for the Crimson Tide on the defense side of football. In terms of them just continuing to have versatile guys, I think he can step on campus and be like one of the more versatile linebackers in his class. He can step on campus and be one of the more versatile linebackers on the Crimson Tide's roster on next season. When I talk about day one impact players, Xavier Crowell has a golden opportunity in front of him. The 5-star running back out of Jackson High School in Jackson, Alabama, easily one of the most complete running backs I've had an opportunity to cover. This guy has vision. He's already more than 200 pounds. He's explosive, proven track speed, can run a sub-11 100-meter dash. It's crazy for me to say this, but based on the fact that he can run a sub-11 100-meter dash, he's going to be in the conversation to be one of the fastest players on Alabama's roster the minute they steps on campus at over 200 pounds. He's a guy who is going to shock and change life when it comes to the Crimson Tide's backfield. That's what he has the opportunity to do, because when you look at Alabama's backfield, I've gone on record and said this, I don't feel like the guys that they have in their running back room for the 2025 season are particularly elite. I don't think that doesn't mean I think that they're bad players. I think they are still really good players, but I don't think that they're super elite type of running backs. But I put Crowell in that super elite running back category in terms of him being a prospect. Of course, there are areas of his game where he would need to grow in terms of his transition to the college football game, but I think this guy has an opportunity to make an immediate impact in Tuscaloosa with this skill set, and he's a special running back for sure. He knows he has his opportunity in front of him, but he's also said, hey, if I don't play right away, I'm okay with sitting and waiting for my opportunity to play during my junior and senior year. At least that's what he said at this particular point in time now, and that's something that you have to admire in this new age of college football, where so many guys are quick to enter the transfer portal when things don't go their way. So I think Xavier Crowell, similar to some of the other guys I talked about, I'm putting him right in that conversation as well. A guy who has the potential to have a day one impact in Tuscaloosa. He's physical, can run through tackles. Arm tackles don't work against his kid. He keeps his feet moving when he's engaging in contact. Ran through defenses so many times during his high school career. He can pull away as well because he has that proven speed. Probably the thing that I have been most impressed about when watching Xavier Crowell play is his vision. His vision is really, really elite in terms of him finding space, knowing what hole to hit, being patient when following his blocks. He's also comfortable catching the football out of the backfield, a direct result of him playing with the 4-star quarterback in Landon Duckworth. Cederian Morgan is a huge get for the Crimson Tide at the wide receiver position out of Benjamin Russell High School in Alexander City, Alabama. He's going to be one of the bigger wideouts the Crimson Tide having a wide receiver room here on next season. When you take a look at Cederian Morgan, the biggest strength of his game and the thing that just jumps out to me whenever I watch him on film and whenever I've watched him at practice and watched him play 2 times this season as a senior at Benjamin Russell High School is his catch radius and dependable hands. This is a guy that don't drop passes. If it's thrown his way, it's most likely going to end up in his hands. He's a guy, once it touches his hands, it's caught. He has a wide catch radius, dependable, strong hands. One of the most dependable pass catchers that I've ever evaluated coming out of high school. So that immediately stands out. The thing that you're not going to see a lot out of Cederian is he doesn't create like a crazy ton of separation at this point in his development. So I keep that at the forefront. And I think that comes kind of as a result of his ability to have that wide catch radius and to have those dependable hands. That's why you see him in so many situations like that. He's not a guy who just creates a crazy amount of separation. So there's a part of his game that we're going to continue to evaluate, wants to continue to make that next step. And once he's able to do that on more of a consistent basis, you're going to see this guy turn into a different type of wide receiver. But in terms of him being able to pull in contested catches, you see him be able to do that. He's athletic. He is a guy who doesn't possess crazy elite speed, but he can get up the football field. He's fast enough to create separation after the catch, but he's a guy, in my opinion, who has a huge upside to be a dominant, impressive type of wide receiver at the University of Alabama. So he's a guy I would watch out for to come in to make that immediate impact, because you never know how fast this guy could continue to develop and continue to take that next step and be a dependable pass catcher for the Crimson Tide. Because when you look at that wide receiver room, not saying that it could happen, but what if you lose an Isaiah Horton and a Jeremy Bernard and you're looking at Ryan Williams to be your key receiver coming back? You have Isaiah Brooks coming back. You have Rico Scott coming back. You have Jalen Hale possibly coming back. You have some other pieces coming back, but some of those guys are not guys who have been dependable forces at wide receiver for the Crimson Tide this season. It has been Horton, Bernard, and Williams. So you take Bernard and possibly Horton away, there's a door open for a wide receiver to come in and make an immediate impact. So Cederian Morgan's going to be in that conversation. Jireh Edwards is a massive get for the Crimson Tide. In my opinion, I think this is one of the most significant gets the Crimson Tide have in this 2026 recruiting class. This guy looks tailor-made for Alabama's Husky position. That extra defensive back the Crimson Tide have on the field, and that came on 4-2-5 swarm defense. Deshaun Jones started there at points of the season. Red Morgan stars there at times now that Deshaun Jones has been banged up at times during the season. When you take a look at Edwards, he's a guy who can play inside the box. He can play deep safety. He can play all over the secondary, all over the defense. He's a physical safety who's going to make you feel him when he makes contact with you. He's the guy who's going to be able to turn and run with wide receivers because he's a 4-4 type of guy. He's a bigger defensive back in terms of his frame. When you talk about Jireh Edwards, you're talking about a kid who is 6'2" in every bit of that 210 pounds. He's a guy who carries a lot of weight in terms of mass because of that frame that he has. And when you take a look at the Crimson Tide's different sets that Kane Womack likes to play, in my opinion, I don't see a world where Edwards isn't in one of those sets as a freshman. That's how high I am on Jireh Edwards. I think he's an immediate day one contributor in Tuscaloosa. He's dynamic, like Alabama's last recruiting class. A lot of people love Dijon Lee. I think a lot of people are going to love Jireh Edwards. A lot of people are going to jump on the Edwards train pretty well. They're going to want him on the football field as soon as possible because he's going to bring a physicality. He's going to bring playmaking. He's going to bring a lot to the Alabama football secondary, and any of the hype and any of the discussions around him, I think they're definitely warranted by what I've seen from the St. Francis Academy High School 5-star prospect. Alabama football 5-star cornerback signing Jorden Edmonds continues to personify what we are looking for in today's game when it comes to the cornerback position. You want these long, lengthy, rangy cornerbacks, guys who can run with receivers, guys who have experience playing wide receiver because they take those ball skills and bring them over to the defensive side of the football. So you want good ball skills, good length. You want athleticism. You want that length also because when guys are long, they typically can, and speed as well, because I think he has decent speed. When guys are fast and they are long, they typically can make up for when they make a mistake, when they get beat or when they get beat inside, when they fall for a move. They typically can cover a lot of ground. I feel like their length allows them to do that along with their speed and athleticism as well. I mean, take a look at Edmonds. He's an all-around athlete. Has always been that for Sprayberry High School in Georgia. Like I said, plays wide receiver, has played defensive back, has been a playmaker for Sprayberry throughout his time there. This is a guy who had been committed to the Crimson Tide since March. One of the first members of the Crimson Tide's 2026 recruiting class, bringing a lot of potential to the table. He goes into that conversation of possibly making an early impact at the cornerback position. And what have we seen over the last few years in Tuscaloosa under DeBoer, under Kane Womack? If you are a cornerback and you can play, you're going to get on the field. Dijon Lee, Xavier Brown. Hey, the bad part for Edmonds is that those guys will be in Tuscaloosa once he arrives, but the Money Jackson is still in the mix. Cam Calhoun looks as if he's going to continue to get more playing time. So, hey, if you can play, you probably can get into the mix. I put Jorden Edmonds in that conversation to be a guy who can make an immediate impact in Tuscaloosa as well. Zyan Gibson, the Crimson Tide's 4-star defensive back signing, it provided a little drama before signing day. Reports came out that he decommitted. He confirmed those decommitments, but within an hour later, he was saying, hey, I'm not decommitting from the Crimson Tide. I'm sticking with Alabama. So Alabama is getting the speedy cornerback from Gaston City to stay inside the state of Alabama. Really impressive prospect because of his speed, his ability to go stride to stride with wide receivers. The thing that I saw really stood out to me watching Zyan Gibson play his senior season at Gaston City High School is his ability to make tackles. I think he really grew as a physical tackle, just a physical cornerback in general. I think he grew in that area during his senior season. Has the potential to be a lockdown type of corner. I think he really excels when he's playing man-to-man coverage. That is why I saw him play a lot in Gaston City, and he looked really good in terms of playing an actual game in man-to-man coverage. But like I said, he's a guy who the Crimson Tide are holding on to after there was some worries before signing day, really probably 48 hours before signing day, but he's sticking with Alabama, becoming one of their more interesting cornerbacks because unlike some of the other guys we are talking about in this video, he is not 6'3", he's not 6'4", he's not the prototypical cornerback that we are seeing Alabama and so many other schools go after. So if he doesn't have that length that we talked about, the fact that Alabama is still taking him, showing that he makes up for that length in other situations. And I think he really makes up for it with that 4.3, 4.4 type of speed that Zyan Gibson possesses. Mack Sutter is a 6'6", 4-star tight end out of Illinois to the Crimson Tide. Basically became an immediate player for him the moment that they offered him. Alabama's tight end coach Brian Ellis sat him down and showed him directly an example of how Alabama would use him at the tight end position. So he's a guy who is a great get for the Crimson Tide. Perfect fit for the way that Alabama wants to use their tight ends. You see Josh Davis, you see Marshall Pritchett, you see Caleb Edwards. You see the tight ends that the Crimson Tide have brought in under Kalen DeBoer, under Ryan Grubb and Brian Ellis. You see them being able to be guys who can go out and catch passes, line up out wide as wide receiver, but you got to be able to put that hand in the ground and block too. That's something that they're not going to go away from. They're going to use their tight ends in a traditional sense in terms of them being big targets who cornerbacks and safeties have problems defending because they are so huge, and with them being athletic, not speedy guys, but guys who can move, who linebackers have trouble covering. And I think Mack Sutter is a guy who fits right into that mold for what the Alabama Crimson Tide are looking at when it comes to that tight end position. Athletic kid. When you see his film, you see him play all these different positions a lot of times, and you see him being used in a traditional sense of the way that the tight end position is usually used at the college level and at the NFL level. I say it all the time. I feel like coaches in some high schools set their tight end prospects behind because they line them up out wide too much at times. No matter what, if they are a big time prospect, if they're going to play at the collegiate level, and if they're going to play in the NFL, they need to have their hand in the ground, being comfortable blocking, just getting better at blocking at the high school football level, so the transition to college can be a lot easier. Mack Sutter is in that conversation as a guy who high school allowed him to do that. I think it's going to be one of the reasons why. I'm not sure how early he will play, but he's at least going to have the tools to be in a position to possibly do so. Jett Thomalla is one of the Crimson Tide's 4-star quarterback signings in his 2026 recruiting class. A guy who had a very efficient senior season in Nebraska. When you take a look at this guy's stat line, threw for 3,484 yards, 58 touchdowns, while only throwing 5 interceptions. The Crimson Tide wanted a quarterback in this class for several different reasons. I've talked about it on multiple videos in the past. Look at Alabama's quarterback situation. Technically, Ty Simpson has the right to come back next year in terms of years of eligibility. Austin Mack does too as well, as long as Keelan Russell. There is a potential possibility, but it's also a possibility that you could lose Ty Simpson to the NFL, which is likely going to happen. You could lose Austin Mack or Keelan Russell to the transfer portal. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but as a coaching staff, when it comes to Alabama, with them being responsible, they have to take into consideration that could come into fruition. That is why they went out and got 2 quarterbacks in this 2026 recruiting class, with one of them being Jett Thomalla, a guy who can push the football down the field, can move around the pocket. You see him keep his eyes downfield, has a great arm as well. A guy who is athletic. You've seen clips of him be able to dunk the basketball. So you're getting a mobile quarterback. I feel like that is almost a requirement in today's game of college and NFL football. All those guys, even if they're not speedy, explosive players, they're able to move around the pocket. They are able to be mobile, and Jett Thomalla fits into that mold as well. Like I said, he could push the football down the field, as you guys can see in his video. Throw a great touch on his deep balls. See him throw a variety of throws as well. Whenever I look at a quarterback, that's kind of like the first thing. That's kind of like the check mark for you to be a collegiate quarterback prospect. You at least have to be able to make all of the throws. And if you're able to make them in some unique situations and hit them online and throw some dots, that's when you become an elite quarterback, being able to move around the pocket and evade pressure and get the ball out and throw a great pass like you see Jett Thomalla do. At times, that's when you're going to see a guy turn into an elite type of prospect and an elite college or elite NFL quarterback in the future. So Jett Thomalla is joining the Crimson Tide as a member of their 2026 recruiting class. The quarterback position is going to continue to be intriguing in terms of who will be the starters over the next few years. Thomalla is going to put his name in that conversation, going to put his hat in the ring for that. Nolan Wilson is a 6'5", 240-pound defensive lineman out of Mississippi, continuing to fit the mold of what the Crimson Tide are looking at the defensive line position. You're not going to see a lot of 300, 290-pound type of defensive linemen the Crimson Tide sign in this class. They're no longer going after those type of guys. They're going after guys like Nolan Wilson and some of the guys they have signature from here in this 2026 recruiting class as of right now during the early signing period, because they want these guys to be versatile. They want these guys to play all across that defensive front. They want them to be able to turn and run. I just think they want more athletic guys because the game is continuing to evolve and offensive players are continuing to be more explosive, faster, bigger, stronger. So you need guys that are built kind of like them, and Nolan Wilson kind of fits into that conversation. You're taking a look at a guy who's really an opportunist. That's kind of like the thing that really stands out to me about watching Nolan Wilson. Whenever I watch his highlight film, you see so many forced fumbles, script sacks. So this is an active guy who's being an opportunist. Kane Womack talks about what those type of plays can do. They preach and they stress taking the football away. Nolan Wilson will bring that intangible to his game, to the game early on, in terms of him being a guy, like I said, who's going to be used in a couple of different ways when it comes to the Crimson Tide. Look at Nolan Wilson. Bandit probably stands out. Like, this likely going to be the position that he plays, that bandit role. You see LT Overton play there. You see Kelby Collins play there. You see Keon Keeley play there. Nolan Wilson could fit into that role as well. But you also see other positions. You see that defensive tackle, basically the position that plays the opposite side of Tim Keenan, that nose tackle when it comes to that 4-2-5 form defense. You see him could play that position like a James Smith plays there. Kelby Collins plays there sometimes as well. Edric Hill lines up in that position. So I'll put Nolan Wilson in that conversation in terms of where he will fit when it comes to the Crimson Tide's roster in the future. Jamarion Matthews is yet another versatile defensive lineman the Crimson Tide are bringing in this 2026 recruiting class. Like I've said, and I'm going to continue to say throughout this video, whenever I talk about these defensive linemen, edge prospects who are projected to play along the Crimson Tide's defensive front, I'm going to say that they're versatile because all of them are going to fit that mold. They're going to be guys who can play bandit, guys who can play nose tackle probably in some sets, guys who can play a defensive end, defensive tackle role in that 4-2-5 form defense. Jamarion Matthews is yet another one of those guys. A physical guy who's an Alabama kid. He played his last season at Gainesville High School in Gainesville, Georgia. But before that, he played at Sparkman High School in Huntsville, Alabama, only playing his senior season in Georgia. So this basically is an in-state kid who knows what it means to play at the University of Alabama, knows the standard, knows what success has looked like when it comes to Alabama football in the past. Matthew knows all of that. He's well aware of all of those different things. When you take a look at Matthew, you're taking a look at a physical, strong type of guy, not long, a guy who is not probably 6'4", probably going to be in that 6'2" range, but you see him have that explosive get off, as you guys are going to see in the video that we're showing you guys today. Active hands, a guy who's physical, can turn speed into power as well. He's a guy who had, before he left the state of Alabama, he led Alabama in sacks as a junior at Sparkman High School. So I think Jamarion Matthews is another great get for the Crimson Tide in this 2026 recruiting class. Kamhariyan Johnson is another one of those physical, versatile defensive linemen the Crimson Tide added to the 2026 class. I have had an opportunity to see this guy in live game action 2 times, one time in the spring and one time when muscle shows open the season against Gaston City High School, the 2025 football season. That is what I'm referring to, his senior year. He was a guy who, in both of those performances, came up with multiple sacks. He's goes strong against the run. They played him from the edge at times, let him get after the quarterback, and let him play within. They're more so within the defensive line at times, showing his versatility and why Alabama likes this kid. Freddie Roach, Alabama's defensive line coach, was actually in attendance during that spring game, the film that you guys are going to see. But when you take a look at Johnson and so many of these other guys, that versatility for sure that all these guys have, he possesses that, but he has this unique skill set where he can play better in space than he should be able to play at 6'4", 260 pounds. So he really excels there a little bit more than you would think a guy his size should. So in turn, I think that will in the future result to him being a little bit better at turning and running than most guys his size. I think that goes along with his athleticism. So I think Kamhariyan Johnson is an in-state kid out of Muscle Shoals High School in Alabama who the Crimson Tide fans should be really excited about. Another homegrown talent headed to Tuscaloosa. Booker is considered to be the Crimson Tide's highest rated offensive line signing in this 2026 recruiting class. 6'4", 280, a guy who's projected to be an offensive tackle at the next level. When you turn on his film, you see the upside that he brings to the table. You see him be able to pull block and finish blocks a lot of times. You're going to see him finish a lot of blocks when you turn on Chris Booker's film. Another offensive lineman the Crimson Tide are adding to their roster out of Georgia. When you take a look at this recruiting class, the Crimson Tide did really well in the state over in Georgia by adding some talented guys at a lot of different positions. But Chris Booker fits into that conversation, like I said, as the Crimson Tide's highest rated offensive lineman. Could be a tackle, could be a guard. He's going to be one of the more versatile offensive linemen Alabama signed this class as well, because he could play almost every position across the offensive front for the Crimson Tide in the future. So Chris Booker is a guy I think Alabama fans should be really, really excited about, because you never know what a guy with position versatility can add to your roster. You can take a look at Alabama's roster right now. You can see Geno Vandermark. You see him play guard. You see him play center. So you see him play a couple of different positions. You add in a guy like Chris Booker. Hey, what is to say that he can't play all 5 if he needs to be called upon? So Chris Booker, physical kid, a guy who I feel like athletic. I think he is, like I said, he probably has the biggest upside out of the Crimson Tide's offensive line 2026 class in terms of their potential, or what we're looking at right now. Carries his weight on really well. Like I said, physical, great size. So Chris Booker is a guy definitely to keep your eyes on in the future in Tuscaloosa. Jared Doughty is a 2026 offensive lineman who the Crimson Tide are pulling away from Georgia. When you take a look at this big offensive lineman, he's projected to be a tackle at the next level, fits the frame of a tackle. Typically, when you talk about tackle prospects, these are guys who are typically 6'5", 6'6". When you take a look at Doughty, he falls right into that frame. When you take a look at him on film, you see him doing a lot of different things that stand out. Like I said, he projected to be a tackle at the next level, but he's a guy who looks to be athletic for his size, can bend. I think that's one of the things I really saw when I saw him line up a couple times. I'm like, yo, this guy can bend, and you want an offensive lineman who's that big to be able to bend. So that's one of the things I really like about Doughty. But I also see there's times where he is pulling and blocking his space really well, carries his weight really well as well. So I think that's something to look out for. This is a guy who is rated as a 3-star, and you're going to see the Crimson Tide have a good bit of 3-star prospects in his 2026 recruiting class. I feel like that's a product of a couple of different things. Actually, when you take a look at the entire recruiting landscape, I think some of it has to do with the recruiting evaluation standpoint in terms of how we evaluate guys, in terms of people who place rankings on recruits. I think that is somewhat a benefit of it and result of why the Crimson Tide have a lot of 3-star recruits. But also I think Alabama's coaching staff believe in their evaluation, believe that, hey, we evaluated this guy can develop into something really good at the next level. And that's what they are seeing in a guy like Doughty. But this is a guy who had other offers, other big time offers next to his name before he committed to the Crimson Tide. He was considering some big time schools. Like I said, he is a product of Georgia. He had offers from Georgia, Auburn, Missouri. So he had some big time offers before he committed to the Crimson Tide and ultimately signed a national letter of intent during the early signing period. So Jared Doughty is a guy who's projected to be an offensive tackle for the Crimson Tide here in his 2026 recruiting class. Tayden Kawaa is another quarterback the Crimson Tide are adding in his 2026 recruiting class. A 6'6" quarterback out of Utah who led his team to a state championship, similar to Jett Thomalla, the Crimson Tide's other quarterback signing in this 2026 recruiting class. You turn on Kawaa's film, you see a lot of different throws. You see him be able to hit the out route. You see him have nice touch on his deep ball at 6'6", but also you see him be able to make plays with his feet. The Crimson Tide are adding another big quarterback to that quarterback room that has Austin Mack, who already stands at 6'6". They also have another quarterback who stands at 6'7". So Alabama is adding quarterbacks who are huge to that quarterback room. But when you take a look at Kawaa, I think one of the things that really stands out to me, you just see all of the different throws he makes when you turn on his film. You see him be so great pocket present in terms of him being able to step up in the pocket, being patient, being really under control and comfortable in the pocket. But like I said, you also see him be able to run out of the pocket when he is forced out of it and still keep his eyes downfield and still able to make plays when he's called upon to roll out and just make a lot of different throws. So probably the thing that stands out to me the most about Kawaa is just the ability to make all of these different throws that you guys are going to see. Also, one of the things that I think kind of like catches my attention is how he's able to move. I think his moves are decisive in the pocket. The more you watch him, it's like no wasted movement when he's in trouble. You see him be under control, just have a sense, really that pocket presence. You see him have a sense of like where I need to be, where I need to go to make sure I give myself just a little bit more time so I can deliver this football. So like I said, whenever talking about these quarterbacks in Alabama 2026 recruiting class here during the early signing period, it's going to be really interesting to see the trajectory of their careers, considering Alabama's quarterback room and where it stands right now. Like I said, Ty Simpson could come back next year. That's not likely, but technically he could. But most likely he's going to move on to the NFL. What happens with Austin Mack and Keelan Russell, that remains to be seen. Pretty sure Alabama hopes to keep both of them, but if you want to lose one, you will want to have at least 2 freshman quarterbacks to add to your quarterback room. Rihyael Kelly is built more like a cornerback that we talked about on this breakdown. Guys are like 6'3", 6'4". He's in that conversation, but he plays safety out of Ohio, and he's signing with the Crimson Tide, projected to be in safety at the next level. When you take a look at a 6'3", 180-pound type of kid, you see Alabama's secondary. They have a couple of guys who kind of fit that type of long, rangy type of mold in terms of DJ Lee, Xavier Mincy. Rihyael Kelly is going to fit right into the realm with those type of guys. When you take a look at Kelly's film at that safety position coming out of Winterwood High School in Ohio, you see him flow down to the football with a lot of great closing speed. Probably the thing that immediately stands out when you turn on his film. You see his closing speed, and you see some physicality for a guy who that doesn't scream when you take a look at his frame. When you listen to 6'3", 180, 185, 190, you're thinking of a kid who probably is an athlete, not really physical. You're thinking about a smaller guy, but when you turn on Rihyael Kelly's film, you see him make tackles for loss. You see him being physical and making tackles in space. You see him playing good over the top as well. So Rihyael Kelly is a guy who I think the Crimson Tide love to have here in this 2026 recruiting class, adding some versatility to their secondary. Zay Hall is one of the Crimson Tide's linebacker signings here in this 2026 recruiting class, projected to be an inside linebacker, off the ball linebacker for the Crimson Tide here in this 2026 recruiting class, signing during the early signing period. Similar to some of the guys we talked about on this breakdown, he's a guy who earned an offer on the Crimson Tide while camping. So Alabama's coaching staff continuing to show that they are putting some weight on their evaluations, in-person evaluations. But when you take a look at Zay Hall, can clock a 4.5, 4.6 40 at 6'2", 220 pounds. When you take a look at his film, I think the thing that really stands out to me is the ability to diagnose where players are going early in their development. You're gonna see that continuously when you look at the films I'm showing you guys today. You see him diagnose where players going, sift through traffic, and get to the football. So you see him be able to play with his eyes really, really well. I think he has a high football IQ. Whenever I turn on his film, it's one of the things that immediately stands out to me about Zay Hall. Alabama is adding a massive 6'7", 3-star offensive lineman in Bear Fretwell. Physical offensive lineman, a guy who's nasty when it comes to run blocking. I think it has a lot to do with this run-heavy offense that he is playing at the high school football level. A lot of times, a lot of coaches don't like to go after offensive linemen who play this type of offense because they usually are stuck behind in their development when it comes to pass protection and pass pro. I'm not sure exactly where Bear Fretwell is in that point of his development, but that is part of why you have a staff that you trust to develop your offensive linemen. But when you take a look at what he does bring to the table, when you take a look at a guy who runs his offense, you know that they're physical. You know that they love to block and they love to have contact and they love to pave the way for running backs, because this offense is basically based on us being dominant. We're pushing a man off of the football. And Bear Fretwell is a product of that. When you turn on this film, you see a lot of good things in that area in terms of him being that run block. You see the seal block. You see him be able to get up to the second level at times. You see him being blocking all down the field, all in space, and being able to continue to just be a physical guy throughout plays. I think he's one player here where he basically scares the guy away who's trying to, the guy basically didn't want to get to the ball carrier because Bear Fretwell was blocking him. So he's a physical presence at about 6'7". So I think it's a nice get here for the Crimson Tide. I think he's although he's 6'7", has the size and the frame of an offensive tackle, a guy who's going to be projected to be an offensive tackle at the next level. I think this guy has some versatility in his game, because I think the offense allows you to possibly be more versatile, because there's a couple times where his lineup as basically supposedly a tackle, but it's almost like he is a guard because there's a guy outside of him, because they have so many blockers, so many tight ends and guys attached to the line of scrimmage in this particular offense. But Bear Fretwell, Crimson Tide are getting a good one in him, in my opinion. Corey Howard is a 2026 3-star defensive lineman out of Georgia who is signing with the Crimson Tide. Howard is a prospect who's really intriguing to me because he's a guy who you see him turn speed into power. You see him be able to turn his body and get skinny at times to make sure that he can stay and not lose ground when it comes to leverage situations. So it's a guy who displays great leverage, can turn speed into power, and with this continuing trend that we continue to see when it comes to the Crimson Tide recruiting defensive linemen, they want guys who are versatile, who can play a lot of different positions along the defensive front. Howard fits into that position. He could play that bandit role. He could drop down and play more into the interior of the Crimson Tide's defensive line. That probably the defensive tackle role the Crimson Tide play. He can rush from the edge on either side. The Crimson Tide have a lot of different sets when it comes to Kane Womack's 4-2-5 swarm defense, and that is why they want versatile defensive linemen who can play at so many different positions. I put Howard right into that conversation. The 3-star defensive lineman who has a huge upside. Like I said, he plays with a lot of strength, a lot of great leverage. You see the power, you see the speed, the power. At times, you see the things that you want to see out of a defensive lineman prospect who you think can be really good at the next level if you develop him. Malique Franklin is one of the last members of the Crimson Tide's 2026 recruiting class to commit to them before signing day. A really interesting situation. Actually pulled in the Alabama offer earlier in the week around Monday and committed to the Crimson Tide on Tuesday and signed with them on Wednesday. So a very strange and interesting turn of events. Hill offers from Oklahoma, Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, officially visited Oklahoma a week before he committed to the Crimson Tide. And this is a guy who the Crimson Tide had not been actively recruiting. But when you're an in-state program like Alabama and it's an in-state kid, you're never too late because of what the program means to the state of Alabama. So that is kind of like how I see that Malique Franklin situation happen fairly quickly. But when we take a look at his game, you're talking about a 6'6" edge prospect who could play a lot of different positions for the Crimson Tide here. Is a guy who you could play in that bandit role, maybe. If you continue to put more weight on him, you continue to develop him. Look at a guy like Keon Keeley. He came in with this similar type of frame. So that bandit role is in the conversation. I don't think the Wolf linebacker position is totally out of the conversation. Maybe he could fit into a role there in terms of him rushing from the edge. It all depends on how well he's able to play in space. But you see him be physical. You see the long length that he has. And you see the athleticism that he possesses. So he's one of the more interesting guys in the Crimson Tide's 2026 class because we don't know exactly where he will fit in his class. So when Alabama gets him on campus and where he's listed on their roster is going to be really, really interesting to me to see where position they place this talented prospect with a huge upside in. Tyrell Miller is the only JUCO offensive lineman the Crimson Tide are going to get a signature from when it comes to this early signing period. Projected to be an interior offensive lineman. You see him playing tackle here in some of the film that we are showing you guys. But as you guys can see, he's most likely going to have a future playing at that guard position where he can pull and make defenders feel bad when he's pulling in space and he's coming down the line making plays. So Tyrell Miller is a guy, like I said, projected to be an interior offensive lineman for the Crimson Tide. Nice size in terms of his frame. Whenever you look at a JUCO kid, you always have to think about the potential of them playing early on because typically they will only have two to 3 years left because they play usually 1 or 2 years at the JUCO football level. But the more interesting thing about college football now, as you guys saw with Diego Pavia, Justin Jefferson's Alabama linebacker, he benefited from this as well. But a lot of the JUCO years are starting not to count against guys now. So we'll see if that affects Tyrell Miller because a lot of guys are going back to sue the NCAA or having another conversation about, hey, those JUCO years shouldn't count. But when you take a look at Tyrell Miller, you're looking at a 6'5", 305 pound guy. Nice size. He doesn't look like he has much bad weight when you take a look at his frame here. So we'll see what he can do at the next level, how he can fit into the Crimson Tide's offensive line scheme. I think something else to really monitor is just how many years will Tyrell Miller actually have at Alabama if some of those other things come into play. So that's what I will monitor when it comes to the JUCO offensive line. That will do it for our in-depth breakdown of the Crimson Tide's 2026 recruiting class after the national signing day of the early signing period. As you guys see, the Crimson Tide have a lot of talent to work with in the future, whether it is on offense, whether it is on defense, versatile defensive linemen, talent out wide, talent at the quarterback position. It'll be interesting to see how these guys fit into the Kalen DeBoer system. Kane Womack, Ryan Grubb fit into the offensive and defensive systems when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide. As always, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Stay locked in and follow the future of Alabama football and Alabama football recruiting on touchdownalabama.com as well as on our YouTube channel. So be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, subscribe to the notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. As always, I'm Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting and Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama.